welcome to another edition of Developer Office Hours. My name is Tracy Rogers, and I am here with Kent Martin, Pat McKay, Ryan Whitley, and Brett Weber, all part of our Maps team. And they're here to give a quick little presentation about what's coming, ask any questions that you have. I think they've kind of skimmed through the whole Ask Me Anything thread on the community, so they're ready to answer all of those questions. And then we'll open it up for Q&A for you guys. So if you have a question at any point, go ahead and either send it through the chat or the Q&A, and I'll make sure that they get it answered. We have an hour scheduled today, so if we don't get to all of your questions, we'll go back into the community thread and we'll make sure they get answered there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to these four.
Thanks, Tracy. So yeah, my name's Kent Martin. I'm the product manager for Maps. Very excited to do this live event with you. I hope I don't accidentally swear or do something I'm not supposed to, but we're going to just do it. I have a presentation. It'll take probably about 5 minutes, and then a short demonstration, which will take another 5 minutes. And yeah, from there, we'll just jump into questions and see where we go. So, as for the agenda, this presentation will cover some intros. I know Tracy gave you our names, but maybe we can give you a little bit more about what we do, and I'll let everyone kind of go around the room and introduce themselves. Cover just the goals for the session, things that we want to get out of it. So please consider when you submit a question or you have a comment, things that we're looking for. Give you a brief overview and retro on things that we've done in the last 6 to 8 months. So looking at the 10.0 release onwards. And then I'll do a quick demo, and then we'll do the Q&A part. So I'm going to go around the room. Maybe Brett, can you just say what you do and what's your favorite map feature or something like that?
Yeah, I'm Brett. I'm dev on the Maps team here, and my favorite feature is the Spatial Files connector coming in 10.2.
My name is Ryan Whitley. I'm the manager of the Maps data team. So my team is responsible for the data that ships with Tableau, and we just make sure it's up to date. We also publish updates to the base map.
My name is Pat McKay. I'm a dev manager on the Maps team. And I guess my favorite feature, I was going to say Spatial File Connector, but that doesn't seem very original. So I think custom territories would be my favorite.
Yeah. Good answers, and I didn't feed you guys either. Right? Very good. Very timely as well, because 10.2 was released last night. So now if you keeners who are logged in and registered for this session have gone out and downloaded 10.2, you can play with the Spatial File Connector and all of those goodies that come with the release. Let me move on in the presentation here, cover the goals, things that we're looking for. So our team wants to better understand a few things. What are the questions you're trying to ask? What are those spatial things in real world terms? Do you want to know how many customers are within a distance of your stores? Like, what is the real use case for how you're working with geographic and spatial data? As much detail as you can provide will be great for us. Also, we want to know about issues, roadblocks, the workarounds that you've invented to get through some challenging scenarios. I know there's so many things and you can do in Tableau. It's a very flexible product. We want to hear about anything that you've done to get around a hard issue, but we also are very interested in solving that issue directly, potentially in the future. And then, of course, you don't need to beat around the bush. You can just tell us what it is you want, and we want to hear that too. We know in the thread a lot of people have asked for certain things, and we've tried to answer everything on the forum thread. But if there's more things that come up, please just feel free to say, and we'd like to know why, and why it's so valuable to you. That would be great. So jumping back a little bit, and retrospecting on things the Maps team and that we've delivered since 10.0. This is a short list. It actually includes more things than this, but I don't want to seem like I'm bragging or something like that. But we've done a lot. Custom territories came out in 10.0. I'm going to do a brief demonstration of that feature for those of you who aren't aware of what it does. There's been new map data in every release, 10.0, 10.1, 10.2. There will be in the upcoming release as well. And I'll just highlight in places in India, Singapore, Brazil, Mexico, many other places around the world. We've updated postal code data sets, administrative boundaries. Lots of data updates have gone into the product. So I hope those have been working out for people. We also added multilingual support for automatic geographic role detection. I like this one. It just gets you into the flow a little bit sooner, real easy. If you connect to data where your field name, whether it's in English or another language, represents a well-known term for geography, we just automatically assign it the appropriate geographic role. So you don't have to go in there and do that little manual step. Map scale came out in 10.1. We added new geographic roles for airports and NUTS codes in Europe. And then, of course, with 10.2, we have the spatial file connector. I know a lot of people have been waiting for it. It really is a leap forward in terms of mapping capabilities in the product. So with that, I'm going to do a demo of custom territories, spatial file support. Tracy, is there any questions or concerns? Am I going too fast?
No, we had a little bit of audio with a couple people, but we're good. We have one question right off the bat, though.
Let's do it.
Does 10.2 help us to combine two separate polygon maps? Coming from Mark Edwards.
Mark Edwards, great question. Does it help you combine two separate polygon maps? There's a few ways to answer this, depending on what it is you're really looking for in a feature. So the one way to look at it is, yes, it does. You can combine two sets of polygons, but if you're looking for individual data source connections as individual layers, that's not the feature that's delivered in 10.2. That is a part of our vision and innovation roadmap, something that we want to work on. But if you're looking for, immediately these other ways in which you can work with multiple data sets, you can create an extract and use the append data from file menu option to bring those files together so long as they have the same schema. You're saying they're both polygon files. There are other ways we can dig into those things on the forum or dig into them after I do the demos. But a full-on layer support type of feature is not in 10.2. So I will jump to the demo. But again, please keep asking questions and filling up the chat queue there on the WebEx. So for custom territories. So for those of you who don't know what this is, we built a feature that allowed you to aggregate geographic data that's already built into Tableau. So as Ryan referenced, he works on the Maps data team and manages data that is provided through geocoding and geosearch and is included in the base map. Custom territories allows you to create ad hoc groups or even use fields that are included within your table or your data set to define a custom region. So we know this is very common when working with sales territories, for instance. That's really a driving scenario. So let me go ahead and connect to my data source. I will admit this is a data source that I've created. No one's, very rarely are people willing to share their sales data. So in this case, I'm going to work with zip codes in the state of Kentucky, and I already have some information about sales within each zip code. So let me go ahead and just jump to the map and a representation of that. So here are all these zip codes I have values for. It's actually every zip code in the state of Kentucky and a few others that wandered into Tennessee there. We have some customers in Tennessee with sales. So I'll try to give you some more context for the feature. So region, in this case, denotes some knowledge that lives within my organization, right? My organization has these special regions. I don't know what they are specifically, central, southern regions, but they mean something to my organization. They also have markets. Again, this is like a built-in territory within your data set, right? They're not zip codes specifically, they're not counties or states. These are these specific things related to how you sell or how you market within your organization. So custom territories allows you to do something really easy, and that is go to that field, which you know represents a geography like market, and choose to base it off of a geocodable field that's already in your data set. So here I can go ahead and choose zip code. When I roll up to market, I see 4 marks now, and jumping back to field map, you can see I've actually aggregated all those zip codes for the state of Kentucky into these regions. So that's pretty neat. Another common way in which people work with zip code data, though, and I'll show all those zip codes here on the map, is that they actually work with the first 3 digits of a zip code. So I know in a few industries and a few customers have said, yeah, we work with this truncated zip code to kind of aggregate information for that sales region. I'm going to go ahead and create a calculated field. I'll call it zip3, say left, stir. This is called zip code, takes 3 digits, contains errors.
Another print.
I'm missing one of these guys?
Yep.
No?
Oh, really?
Let's try again. Left, the string. Zip code's not a string though, I want to make it a string. That's valid. There we go. So here I have this truncated version of my zip code. Again, I can go in there, assign it to be based off of the underlying data, and then I can just drag that onto the viz, use my zip code 3s. There you can see what they would look like, and if I remove zip code, that aggregation happens, and if I bring on sales, well, I have only one mark available, or only one pill available for color. Let me bring back zip code onto detail, and there they are. So you can see I'm working with these custom territories, aggregating all that sales information, and then just to highlight what that would look like if I brought zip code back on and I put sales as a label, you know, you get this very cluttered, kind of noisy map, right? Again, if I take zip code off, it's showing that aggregation. So that's a really cool feature for those of you working with markets, your own custom geographies. Tracy, are there any questions about custom territories, how it works?
Specifically about custom territories, not specifically about custom territories.
Okay, so let's hold on to the other questions
Okay.
though. Let me do the spatial file demo because we're talking about custom geographies. We should just jump right into that one. So I'm going to do a couple of scenarios here, and hopefully, or maybe I'll just do one depending on how many questions there are. I don't want to spend time kind of going through all these demos. I really want to spend more time getting to your questions, but I'll do this one. So with spatial file support, again, what does this mean? So for folks who don't know what spatial files are, there are many formats in the world, file formats that include spatial data in their native type, right? So for those of you who've been working with Tableau for a long time and have worked with custom polygons, and you've done some pre-processing of data to structure tables in a point-ordered format just to create custom polygons, well, you no longer have to do that processing step. You can just work with the original files that you probably started with. So let me jump to the city of Toronto. I have a data set from. I'm from Toronto, so I always do demos with Toronto data. And I'm going to go ahead and just add this shapefile directly to Tableau. Now this shapefile and all shapefiles that we bring into Tableau will include this new column called geometry, and it'll show you the actual primitive type. This is a polygon data set. And in this case, let's just go ahead and start to build out a new sheet. So here's that geometry field. It's treated like a measure. I can just double click it, and there are my custom shapes, right? I no longer have to build custom polygons. This is the custom geographic data set I want to work with. You'll notice one thing just about working with the data. It is a measure, and we apply a default aggregation of collect, which is essentially like a union of all these shapes together. So as you interact with it, know that we're looking for a level of detail, basically like a group by, to decide how we should aggregate the underlying data. In this case, I could just go in and say, pick my area ID as the unique key for each underlying area in Toronto. These are voting subdivisions, kind of like wards in the city. But of course, there's no other really useful attributes to use in this data set. I actually want to bring in my data about voting that occurred in a recent election. So I can go back to my data source. I can leverage cross data source joins, which also came out in 10.0, and bring my data and integrate it with this shapefile data source. So I think I have a shapefile here, or a spreadsheet, sorry. Stay open to that. String, I know it's going to use the area name field as the field to create the match between the two data sources. So I go back to the data source, For those of you that know Toronto, you know that Etobicoke is obviously not included in this data set. But then I can work with the voting information that I have in my spreadsheet. And again, I downloaded this from the City of Toronto, so this is all real data. And I can just drag percentage voted up onto color. Or, number of electors, whatever the variable is that you're interested in, I can go ahead and create that map. And the performance is really good, the interactivity is really good. So that's the spatial file connector in brief, showing you connecting to shapefiles and integrating it with your data sources, which are a really popular way, which will be a very common way in which you interact with this data set. And then I also want to just call out briefly that on the Tableau corporate blog, there was a post that I wrote that went up last week that highlighted these examples, but also a third example of working with multiple shapefiles. So you could choose the level of detail and the custom geography that you're working with. If we have time later, I can show you exactly what I did, but I want to stop here and maybe give Tracy a chance to go through some of the questions and open it up to the team so we can respond to you. So you guys have the floor now.
So one question related to the spatial file connector. This is from Peter Seaman. His question is, can you give an indication or example of performance with new spatial file connector or map shapes versus the custom polygons?
Yeah, that's a great question, Peter. I don't have like a quantitative number off the top of my head, unfortunately. I know we did a lot of evaluations around working with some of the biggest data sets. I can tell you that I have a data set here on my machine that I was just referencing, which is a 120 megabyte census sector level data set, kind of like census tracts in the US, for Sao Paulo in Brazil. So it's a 120 meg file. There are thousands and thousands of these very detailed polygon shapes, and the performance and interactivity is really, really good. When you look at the way you used to have to do this work with custom polygons, so you used to have to do that point ordered thing and break out the individual polygons into all these individual vertices. You could take an example. I have some examples of really detailed data sets that maybe included, say, 200 polygons, and after processing them to use the old way of working with custom polygons, they generated 2 million or plus marks. So over 2 million vertices were in that data set, each turned into a mark in Tableau. And when you start to work with millions of marks, you do get some restrictions in Tableau, like some of the interactivity and hover effects and things like this. They're not on by default to optimize rendering and sort of that interactivity performance. We basically, it's one row per mark now with these data sets, right? So unless your table actually has 2 million polygons, there's a little bit more to it. We do take into effect some of the details of the geography, but the performance has actually been really good. So can I tell you that it's a 50% gain? I can't give you that actual number because it really depends on the data set, the level of detail, how many polygons. There's a lot of other things in play. But I can tell you that, we released it and we consider it very high quality and very performant. So, one, I encourage you to try it out and let me know if you think so. Because if you say it's not good enough, well, then we'll go back and see what we can do. But hopefully at the end, too, I can give a little demo, or maybe while Tracy's bringing up the next question, I'll load that Sao Paulo data set and show that off, too.
I'll just add quickly that we spent a lot of time trying to make spatial file connectors fast, interactive, to make that experience really, really seamless for you. And sort of what Ken alluded to, if you're finding performance issues with your spatial file, let us know. We're really interested in trying to make that experience quick and interactive for you.
So we have a couple questions related to line geometry. Two people, both Burke and Catherine, are asking, will line geometry ever be supported?
That's a good question for Brett, who's working on it. So knowing that Brett's working on it, what do you think, Brett? Will it ever be supported?
Yes, it will be supported in the future at some point. Probably not in this next upcoming release of Tableau, but past that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and just to pile on to Brett's comment, and, I put him on the spot a little bit. He chose to be in this meeting to listen to the community, and he's not working on that feature right now, but that's okay. Yeah, we have plans to support it. It's basically our highest priority feature that we're working on right now, and as soon as we can get it done, you know, we're gonna get it out there. So it's coming soon.
Awesome.
So Tracy, maybe just pause for a second. I can get back to Peter's question. I think my screen is still shared and everything's good. So I hope you can see in the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil and around that region, I have a very detailed data set. This is 120 meg data set that I referenced earlier. Let me just bring out some level of detail there. So this is 68,000 polygons. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. I want to show you a couple things just so you know that how we considered how to improve performance for this file. Now pay attention, and hopefully this comes across in the WebEx. So did you see there was a second there where you saw some jagged kind of representations of shapes? If you didn't see it, well, maybe I can produce it again because this file is so detailed. So again, you're seeing some sort of overlapping and disconnected shapes, right? And then all of a sudden it kind of snaps back to reality. So we built in dynamic simplification for the feature to ensure that we have optimized performance and rendering. So when you're working with these huge data sets, you know, we're not trying to draw all the individual sort of, 10-foot by 30-foot census tracts that are within the city of Sao Paulo when I'm looking at the entire region in southeastern Brazil. So we've done a lot of work like that to ensure performance is really finely tuned. And this is just one I wanted to highlight. But you can see, I'm interacting with these features. I'll zoom out a little bit here. Or just jump back to the full extent of the data. And this is an immense data set, and I think Tableau would have trouble if I turned this into custom polygons, kind of like the old way of doing it. You would definitely see some lag in some cases, but now, with this data set, it looks good. What else we got, Tracy?
Well, this is just one question from Chelsea. She was wondering why you can't see your box to say, like, see the full viz or just half viz is all grayed out. Do you know? I'm
not exactly sure what the question is referring to. Are we talking about what I'm looking at, or is there a different question?
About the UI.
On the dashboard?
Yeah, so right next to the pin, I think it's because you have it pinned, potentially. We'll follow up with that question.
Yeah.
Okay, so starting from the top now, some of our first questions. So this is from Burke Foley. They have some ArcGIS web services that they'd like to consume in Tableau workbooks, but they don't host these services. We can bring them in through WMS one at a time, but the issue is that we would like to use a base map alongside this. For example, a Mapbox street style as a base map, a WMS connection to NOAA weather, and adding in data from Tableau on top of all of that.
Yeah.
So he has two questions here. Can a TMS file be configured to bring in multiple connections, so that WMS server and a Mapbox style? And question number two, Esri Connect from Mapbox looks like it might deliver what they need, which is allow Arc server data to be brought in automatically to Mapbox. Is that an option?
Hey, great question, and that wasn't just one question. That seemed like 6 questions. I wasn't keeping track, but I'll take a stab at some of those, and Pat, maybe you have some thoughts on some of those too. So you asked about multiple connections in a TMS file. So I think the answer is no. So I'm fairly confident the answer is no. I've tried to figure this out or figure out a way. I just don't think you can have multiple independent connections within the file. I know one of the Tableau Zen masters, Jeffrey Schaefer, I hope I am pronouncing his name correctly, recently had posted a blog about a number of tips working with maps in Tableau. And his number one tip was actually a TMS customization that basically allowed you to custom style your own Tableau base map. It was really neat. But even looking at that and some other sources of inspiration, what I know about how the TMS files work, I don't think there's a way to have multiple connections. The other question about just in general, you want to have a base map, a WMS connection, and then work with an interactive layer as well. So this again is kind of in the bucket of like a layers feature, one where we support multiple connections. Although I will say, you know, the service connections like the WMS services and ArcGIS services, it is a little bit different because we're basically bringing something in just as a service that isn't really meant to be this interactive mark layer. You know, so Tableau could treat it differently. I know we've talked about this a little bit. I've been in meetings where we've talked about, you know, multiple WMS connections or multiple service connections. So it's something that's definitely on our plate, something that we're trying to think about. At this point, it hasn't really bubbled up to be the top priority or something that we're working on immediately. But something else you mentioned is something that we're looking at in the near term, and that's support for ArcGIS services via a Tableau web data connector. So this is something that we're looking into. You know, we haven't committed to building it, but know that it is something sort of on our roadmap of, you know, we want to make sure that people who have a lot of reliance or infrastructure around working with ArcGIS and that ecosystem, that they have a way to pull that data in and pull the information they need to support their visualization or their business case in Tableau to pull that in. So I know Pat had worked with the web data connector team on sort of maybe prototyping or a little bit of early work on this. So maybe you can just say that went well or didn't go well, or I don't know if you have anything else there, Pat.
Yeah, we have written some code to help the infrastructure part side of that. And there's another team that's going to be using that code to deliver this scenario you're talking about. Not sure what release it's slated for, but we can follow up and try and find that out for you.
Yeah, I think a part of it too. I mean, we also have a relationship with Esri and basically anyone that we build. Anytime we build a web data connector, you know, we want to have, like, there's probably some joint marketing and sort of, you know, some crossover stuff that we want to do. So we're ironing out that kind of stuff as well, but know that we're very keen on supporting the workflow of connecting to ArcGIS services. You asked another question as well about Mapbox Connect to ArcGIS, or, you know, whatever that Mapbox specific feature is. So if that is I'm not completely sure about the scope of that sort of feature or product. But if it's essentially from Mapbox, you can plug in some URLs that reference these Esri services and create that as a base map layer within Mapbox, and they build the tile set and they do the requests, you know, like they have all that stuff on their end. And you can connect to that style in Tableau. I mean, that seems like a very real possibility. I haven't played with it. I'm going to go try it out. But that sounds like that could be something that works. I don't know if there was another question, Tracy, or not, but I think
there's lots more questions.
For that specific set of questions from Burke or whoever that was, I think it was Burke. I think that's good, though.
I think, yeah.
All right.
All right, let's see here. Alan Walker has a lot of questions.
We're not taking questions from someone that we know is smarter than all of us. But Alan, yes, fire away.
I'll start with his first question. Are there any plans to incorporate, sorry if I say this wrong, OGR2 OGR or GDAL functions? For example, ST functions, basic functions such as union, clip, merge, and join.
Yeah, great question, Alan. This is one of those things too where, you know, we haven't necessarily said we're going to go do this, we're going to go build these features, but we're very interested in it, right? I mean, you're asking because you have spatial analysis on your mind. These are questions you want to ask. You have customers or clients you want to work with that want to ask these types of questions, and the easiest way to solve, you know, the intersections, the contains, the can I create a buffer around these things, is via these means. So we're very aware of that. It's something that, you know, again, there's a lot of interest on our side. We're definitely kind of doing some of that user research as well in parallel to make sure that, you know, we're always working on the highest priority, most important thing for our customers that supports the greater mission at Tableau. But, you know, I'm certainly not saying, no, we've never thought about it, don't know what you're talking about. We're very much on board and are interested in it.
We've got a question from Heather Lansky. She was wondering, for custom territories, could you use school district?
Yeah, great question. So the thing with custom territories, the prereq for custom territories is you have to have something that's geocodable in Tableau. So you have to have a zip code or a county or a state or a congressional district even, you know, like you have to have something that Tableau knows how to geocode. Then you can group it together or map to that. So that's custom territories, the feature. Spatial files and like custom geographies, I know it's very similar, but spatial files will allow you to connect to any spatial file that includes potentially this school district data set, or, you know, it could be police precincts or some healthcare districts or, you know, some biogeographic region. So if you have a shapefile or map info table or other supported file type, you could just connect to that directly, and that's fairly common, I think. A lot of school districts and school boards have spatial data, and they look at, you know, their districts using these types of files or within a geographic information system, and they can create those files. So with 10.2 and spatial file connections, you'll be able to connect to school districts so long as you have that file. So I don't really think it's a custom territories thing. You know, you probably don't have school districts based on zip codes. Maybe you do, I don't know. But I think that covers it.
So Igor has two questions. One is, with custom territories, can you also use shapefiles?
I'll let someone else speak. I mean, I could answer that question too. Does anyone else want to take that one? I had to plug in my computer before it died, so being very unprofessional.
Yeah, I can take that one. So with spatial file connection, you can't directly use custom territories with the geometry field that we provide. We've looked into ways where we could allow that in the future, but with this first release, that's not supported. But the collection aggregation does allow for you to group territories based off of some sort of dimension that you bring in with your data set. So you could do something very similar to custom territories with just using the collect aggregation. You can also, you know, turn off borders so that you don't see the borders between the regions. But you know, that's one potential workaround. But in the future, we're interested in that, and we want to see how we can make that work.
And I think that should answer Aaron's question as well, which is there a way to get Tableau to interpret a region like EMEA as a custom set of individual countries?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, custom territories or shapefiles, depending on how you do it. If you have just a list of countries, you can use custom territories. If you actually have EMEA and other custom geographies in a shapefile, just connect to it.
Yep.
And the second part of Igor's question was, does it mean that tab geohack and shape2tab don't need to be used anymore?
Yeah, so with those sort of community tools, I can't say that I know every way in which they're being used and utilized. I know people have done really creative things with those hacks. I do think that some large portion of use cases are now obsolete, you know, for how people used to use tab geohack and shape2tab. So yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you were doing, but I do want to sort of call out and just kind of underline relying on tab geohack and other, you know, sort of hacks and things that people have built that are unsupported could break in the future. You know, we're not trying to purposely break things. We want to be able to give notice because we know how many people relied on specifically tab geohack. But it is sort of vulnerable to us doing anything within geocoding and how geocoding works in the future. So just be aware of that. If you can figure out a way to move to using spatial files, I would certainly encourage you to do that. And just to reiterate, I do think a lot of the use cases, very common ones, will now just, you'll work with the shapefile and you won't even think twice.
Our next question is from Greg Lathroff. Will the shape of the generated zip code be the same as a download of Tiger census zip code polygons? Is it a ZTCA or zip code?
Want to answer that, Ryan?
For the first part, the shape will not be the exact same, partially because we do a process of simplification before we put it into the product. So the raw data that we download or that we acquire from vendors is processed before it goes into the product. So it won't be an exact match. Regarding the ZCTA versus zip code, can you field that question?
Yeah, they're as far as I know, they're not a one-to-one match. So, you know, that's the short answer. Let me just look back here, the Tiger census zip code polygons. You know, I do have a question here though, because we do commercially license data that we use in the product specifically for zip codes, and the actual source of the United States zip codes is not clear to me. I mean, it could be through some other vendor, not directly from the census or someone else. So as much as I'm like, you know, 98% sure that they're not the same, I could come back on that and say, you know what, they might actually be. But that's something we can follow up on the thread. And this was Greg Lathroff? Yeah. So Greg, I know you're very active. I see you on in the Twitter sphere and on the forum. So if I don't remember to follow up on this on that thread, just shoot a post there and we'll get back to it.
All right. Can we expect, this is from Michael Hesser, can we expect to be able to use Tableau generated lat-long values in live calculations?
Hi, Michael. This question was asked in the thread, and I think I responded to Sean, who'd originally asked it, but you piled onto it. You wanted to know too. I think I included you in that response. Now I feel like you're putting me on the spot here. You want something that's been recorded, so you have it in history. So I'll say that we'd like to enable that scenario. There is more to it to flush out sort of how the data pipeline works in Tableau, you know, and moving geocoding around within the inner workings of Tableau all come with serious ramifications that need to be thought through. So again, it's not a slam dunk. You know, we're not just going to say, yeah, we're going to do it. It'll be at this release. But know that there are, like, you know, architecture and sort of, you know, deep plumbing work that's going on within the product, that one of the outcomes of that work too will be to enable a more flexible sort of data pipeline, and you'll be able to sort of move some of these pieces around. So I know I'm getting into some of the technical details of it a little bit, but with some of this work sort of coming to fruition at some point, again, I don't know when, and you know, it could be released in different ways, all in the spirit of more flexible sort of combinations of data or use of data and more performance within the product. So yeah, at some point I think we'll get to it, but it's certainly something that we know about. It's a driving scenario for some of this sort of investigative and research work within the core sort of implementations in the product in terms of how data moves around.
Okay, I'm going to field another one from Alan. And Alan, sorry if I don't get to all of your questions. For Esri Connect, is it a file geodatabase or a personal geodatabase?
Yeah, so Alan, I'm not sure if you're talking about something else, but I mentioned earlier connecting to Esri and ArcGIS services. So we weren't talking about direct connections to file or personal geodatabases. We're talking about actual web feature services or published services to ArcGIS server. If you're asking about, will there be a way in which we can connect to these sources in the future? Again, that's sort of driven from, customer demand and sort of the importance and, again, weighed against all other features. It's again, the list is long and wide of spatial sources and what's important. This is something that we're considering. If you're referring to like the Mapbox Esri Connect thing, I'm not really sure what the answer is, and I can do some more research there myself. So I'm not quite clear on the intent of the question, but I hope I covered it with that answer. And don't go back to Alan. No more questions for Alan.
All right, well.
I'm kidding.
Well, Alan, you have a lot of questions, so let's get through the other ones, and then maybe I'll take you off speaker and you can go into detail then. Yeah. This one is from Aubrey Perry. Almost all of the spatial data that they use is based in state plane. Are there plans for supporting other coordinate systems in the future?
Pat, you want this one?
Nope.
Nope. I know you love alternate projections.
I do.
Yeah, so are there plans? There are no immediate plans in the near term to support alternate projections. However, with spatial file support, we do actually support reading the data that is within that spatial reference, and we convert the data to WGS84, and all data goes through this pipeline to come into Tableau. So if you're working with data in different projections, again, we're leveraging some open source libraries, and we built this kind of transformation conversion process right when you connect to a spatial file. So what does that mean? Most state plane projections are going to be supported. It's possible that you could have a custom projection that will not be supported, and Tableau may not know what to do with it, or may render things in strange places, or tell you that things are beyond the bounds of the world because they're greater than or less than 90, 90, 180, 180. As far as a future-looking feature around supporting specific projections and actually rendering data within that projection, again, this is something that we do hear from customers from time to time. It hasn't bubbled up to that high priority kind of like, we really want to address this. But we also want to be sort of forward-thinking and know that this could unlock storytelling scenarios, sort of just ease of use for people and working with their local projection. It matters, and we know that. Certainly as we get, into the real geo-geeky people who are going to see spatial file connectivity in the product and really dig in. So yeah, I hope that kind of covers the question. I know it may not have been what you're hoping to hear, but who knows, maybe
I'll pile on to answer. Yeah, Ken and I talk about this fairly often. Especially if you have a polar projection or something like that where it's just not going to work in Web Mercator. So it's something we really would like to get to. We hear about it from you guys. But like Ken said, there's fitting that into everything else we're trying to do. So for the short term, the answer is just no. But the long term, we definitely want to be able to provide that kind of functionality for you.
We've got another question from Greg. Is there a way to link the zoom scale view of one map to another map in a dashboard? Map of populations change by zip in one map, market share by zip in another map, but they'll always draw to the same view.
So it sounds like the question is you're trying to basically have the same zoom level in multiple maps across regardless of the data that's being displayed.
Yeah. So.
Is that the question?
Let's let Brett answer that. Make that assumption.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Let's say, like, regardless of data, because I'm curious if it meant the same data, like different variables, but for the same zip codes.
Right.
So the extent and the boundaries would be sort of the same.
Mm-hmm.
But if it actually is different data,
Yeah.
And they just want to look at like points over here and polygons over here and then synchronize that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, so if that is the case, and I'm not sure, one way you might be able to do this is create what we call a small multiple map. So basically you have, latitude and longitude on the rows and columns, and then some sort of dimension on rows or columns. And so basically you end up with multiple maps in the same view that are all going to be synchronized to the same zoom level. So when you zoom one, the other ones will also zoom. So maybe you could do something there to support that case. And then if you wanted them on, up to 2 layers, I guess, on the same map, you could make the view a dual axis view. But yeah.
So on a similar note, can a dual axis shapefile have different marks?
Different mark types? Yes. Yeah, you can totally have different marks on a dual axis map view.
Okay, let's see here. Here we've got a new one from Roshana. She posted this in the thread about street mapping and was referred to the fast speed geocoding online. However, she's using PHI data and worries about security issues. She has client street addresses that I'm trying to map with Tableau version 9.3. Is there any, do you have any say on security by chance?
Let me take a stab at answering this question.
I might be able.
Go for it, Pat, yeah.
I guess if you're using a extract, you could apply a filter, depending on the user that's connecting to it, to achieve that. I'm not sure if that gets to the heart of your question, but that would be one approach you could use.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it, so the Roshana is saying she's using batch geocoding online, right? So she's using some online service with her data. So this is a security concern. Not talking about Tableau at this point. If she was going to batch geocode to get lat longs for a bunch of addresses, that's outside of what we're going to govern. And you have to ensure that you are working with services that you trust. I know those came from recommendations in the post, but everyone should do their due diligence when using anything online like that. You're using client street addresses, yeah, so again, at this point, I think you're really looking for maybe advice on a trustworthy available geocoding service. So maybe some folks from our team can just kind of huddle up. We know that you asked us on the forums. We could come back to it and respond in the thread if we have anything different. So I think that should cover it, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to understand the nature of the security problems. So maybe this is a longer thread. Mm-hmm. We can start offline on what the sort of the details of the concern are, and we can try and figure out something that would help you out.
All right, are we ready to, Alan, I'm going to take you off speaker and you can ask your question. You ready for this? All right, Alan.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, Alan.
Good. So I'm really super pumped for this capability because, for 4 years we've been using, other tools like Tab GeoHack and all of the shape to tab and these sort of things. So this is a great way forward. So if you don't mind, what I'm going to try and do is there's been a couple of questions that have been asked already, and I was just going to step through a couple of them because we have answered some of these questions a while ago using kind of slightly different methods. So the first one was the school district question asked by Heather Lansky. So back in 2013, Craig Bloodworth and I developed a thing called tablewmapping.bi. It's a website that houses custom shape files in TD format. And that school districts one is definitely available. I have the URL for that. If if you want. It's in one of my questions, so that may answer it. That's great, Tracy. Thanks. And that'll certainly save a problem. My questions really are more a case of the decision to simplify the shapefiles and bringing them into Firebird. For performance reasons, I understand that. For rendering reasons, I understand that. But as a cartographer, simplification can be slightly contentious, especially when you're talking about boundaries. The boundary lines really matter on a map, and I think the decision to simplify would have been a difficult one to choose because you're trading off performance against accuracy. So my question really would be then, is there in the plans to move to a true vector format, and that the users would be given the option to simplify the vertices when they bring them in? Or is there an understanding that there's still a place for tools like Shape to Tab that give the user the option to simplify the vertices and the boundaries of the files? The second question is kind of related to the same thing, in as much as drawing of inner ring donuts. Now this is kind of where you have, say, you've got a volcano inside an island, inside of a inlet, inside of another island, and it's difficult to do from creating or generating the shapefile. And I was wondering if that feature has made it through the beta into production. I tested it in the beta. It certainly didn't seem to be functional, but I'm just wondering whether now that 10.2 has been released, that the inner ring donut problem has been solved.
Thanks, Alan, for the question. I'll try to start from the first thing that you asked and first things that you alluded to. I know we have about 4 minutes left on the office hours, so I'll try to cut through this. I'm in no way trying to be short or brief. You can always contact me afterwards or through the forums or any other way if I don't address the question in the way that, or completely. With Tableau mapping.bi in the school districts, I mean, personally, how do you know what school districts this person was looking for? Or do you have all the school districts in the U.S.? So I just have that as an open question. But let me go on. You mentioned Firebird and spatial files. Yes, Alan said he has all of them. Great. You mentioned Firebird and spatial files. So spatial files and Firebird should not be in the same sentence. There's no connection to Firebird when you connect to a spatial file. You connect to a shapefile or one of these other formats that we support. We do load it in based on a direct connection to that file, and it is not transferred somehow to Firebird and then simplified permanently. We did choose performance over accuracy at all times in the view, but of course, as you zoom in on the data, we are showing that data set as completely as we can. I know, and I certainly consider, boundaries and borders to be a very serious subject. Of course, spatial files is allowing you to choose what data you work with, and we believe there's a certain amount of flexibility there that the user has to make a decision about what they want to use. Now, if they don't like the simplification or any other behavioral aspect, I know we've talked about this kind of in short, like we know this is something that we might have to do or maybe we have to consider. Let's get more feedback about it. We have not received a lot of feedback about it from people that were particularly concerned about borders or the simplification algorithm itself. but again, we want to hear more about that.
Add something to the simplification.
Yeah.
Well. So the simplification that we do is dynamic, and so we also make sure that any changes we do through simplification shouldn't be perceptible in the end rendered view. So we basically look at the pixels that are going to be displayed, and we see are multiple edges going to be drawn within the same pixel. And so if you zoom in, you can see when Kent did the demo that you see the simplified form, but then it snaps to the unsimplified. It basically redoes the simplification after you zoom in, and so we attempt to have it not be perceptible unless you're in the middle of zooming until the zoom commits.
Yeah. We're really talking about sub-pixel culling of basically of the file, and simplification applied at that level, right?
Exactly.
And at no point are we like throwing away vertices outside of that rendering piece. Right. The full data is there, available to use by Tableau, whatever you're doing, right?
Correct.
So if you're doing a calc or something, or whatever you're doing, right? You're, we're not like actually applying a simplification to the raw data, and then you cannot get back to that.
Exactly.
The Firebird simplification was another part of that question, which is done outside of the product. Maybe Ryan, you can talk about that a little bit. We're trying to be as careful as possible to maintain the borders when we're doing that simplification in-house.
Well, for geocoding, so maybe geocoding is different than the base map, right? In that regard.
We're at time.
Keep going.
Keep going. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I'll just say I mentioned briefly that for the built-in Firebird vectors that ship with the product, the team does simplify, and it is a trade-off between performance and size in this case. And so we basically do the best we can. We use complexity algorithms to try to figure out what's the optimal simplification while still preserving as much of the border's accuracy as possible. But it is a trade-off, and can't discuss why we do that. If you have other questions about how we do it, please follow up after this.
Yeah, Tracy, I know Alan also asked about the inner rings.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, the inner rings, so as far as I know, a polygon with an interior ring, a donut, works just fine in Tableau. I'm not sure if you have figured out, or you have some special, case with the data you're working with that's broken this in some way, but I'd ask you to retest with 10.2 and just send me a screenshot or the data. We have lots of, terrible data that we've tried to push through the system, so we know what works, what doesn't work, and I'm fairly confident this is working. So please let us know.
Yeah.
Tracy, with that, I know there are so many. There are other questions in here. Can we ask that people? Do we have we can just copy and paste these, and I don't know how best to respond to people. Can we just ask they post them on the forum?
Yeah, I think we're going to either post them on the forum. I've kind of been keeping track of a lot of them that we didn't specifically answer. Some of them are repeats, but we'll make sure we post them there and get them answered. And as other questions pop up, feel free to post on there. So.
Great. Yeah, so I just want to recap and say thank you to everyone for attending. I see that there were like 80 attendees. Our goal was 2 million, right? Like we really, we wanted to beat the biggest online MOOC, but I'll take 80 to start. That's awesome. And we'll see you on the forums. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.